I hope that your semester is going well and that everybody is doing as healthy and as present in this moment in time. So we wanted to have this space first for those members also like that couldn't attend ATHE in Austin. And we have this town hall discussion about the finances and the future of ATHE in general, but also for us that are here, and it's great to see so many familiar faces and members of the board here to continue to take a deeper dive, I think, into what is possible. I mean, this is a moment in time that is, I think, very tricky, to say the least, for many in very environments, in the field, in academia, in theater, in academia, and so on. And Amy and I were chatting at the top of this meeting, and one of the things that came to me is that how do we think about this moment that is not necessarily the struggles that we have, something that is particular to any organization, but just a signals of these times that we're living, that many things are changing, and if we don't adapt, there is not going to be sustainability. Actually, we can question the value of all the organizations or institutions if actually we don't do some changes to better serve all people. Once again, buenos días a todos y bienvenidos a un nuevo comienzo, new beginnings. My name is CarlosAlexis Cruz, and I'm pleased to have begun my term as president, as your president of our Association for Theater in Higher Education. I first must acknowledge the shoulders of all of my ancestors and all the people that I represent, in which shoulders I solidly stand on. The hidden heritage of the Taino people, my country, and still a colony in the 21st century, Puerto Rico, and the whole Latinx contingent currently residing in the United States. Es un honor para mí estar aquí hoy de frente y representando a todas nuestras culturas latinoamericanas. Yo llevo un orgullo en el pecho. I also thank you for being here today. We are in conversation with each other, and while we are doing a brief presentation, we mostly want to hear from you. What are your hopes and dreams for ATHE moving forward? What can ATHE do? What can we all do better as a collective membership organization? The reality is that for me, from the beginning, ATHE has always been a space in which I have felt welcome and a space in which I can grow. As a Latinx individual that was born and raised in Puerto Rico, received my undergrad degree in theater and film in Puerto Rico, and didn't set foot in the United States until my graduate school days, where I specialized in physical theater and contemporary circus. My level of isolation and in need of support post-professional performing career was significant. And I didn't know what to expect when I decided to use my research funds in 2014 for my first conference presentation. And here I am today. Considering today's discussion, I would like to recall the moment I became the VP for conference in 2020, with a team that led the much needed responses to the multiple pandemic of those times, and in these times, COVID and systemic racism. Back then, and in collaboration with our BTA colleagues, Eunice, who's here, Nicole, Daniel Banks, we set a call for action to all of ATHE, which I believe it is worth revisiting both now and for the foreseeable future. Back then, we asked the questions, what do you have to fear or gain in doing anti-racist work? Who is in the room and who isn't? We can ask the question here now. What does that mean? What action steps can you take to lead to sustainable change? In light of these questions, I'd like to share a story on how racism, gatekeeping, and white supremacy shows up in our day-to-day lives. My personal story, which I shared back in Austin. When I received the nomination email from Harvey regarding the possibility of running for re-election for presidency in 2021, I immediately shared this news with a former leader back here in my institution. Back then, and quite frankly now, I felt that my artistic life and different research endeavor were taking off in many directions. So I was quite busy, so my thoughts were to decline the invitation. I reached out to said leader because as a new non-white artist scholar in academia, I could really use the support and encouragement from those leaders we get to work with. But instead of receiving a simple congratulations and let me know how I can support you, you decide to move forward with this, said leader decided to reply to my email, CCing all upper administration and explaining why I shouldn't do this work, questioning my leadership skills and availability. I was baffled by the response, which came also in time when I began my term as the Assistant Dean for Equity and Justice in my college. I was baffled because I couldn't believe that leaders couldn't see my intention behind it. They couldn't see the journey I had traveled to this point, from barely speaking English when I began graduate school to this particular moment in time. And I felt it was an attempt to hold me back and to keep control. And we all know what that represents and where that comes from. So after reading the note, I immediately went to my other email and replied to Harvey, I happily accept my nomination for president-elect and look forward to running for election. It became clear then that I needed to do this not only for me, but for all the Latinx people that might be fighting the same fight and might be in a similar position. And by extension, all of our Black and brown folks, but most importantly, for my daughters. I needed and need to model the world I want to see for them, and we need to act on in order to make it happen. I think to this day, I still think about that. Act on. We need to move on. We need to enact. Hoy, yo me siento thankful, orgulloso, energized, driven to help us take the much needed next steps for ATHE and to act on them. It is 2023, and so many things have happened in the pandemic era, and more is ahead as we look to the year 2024 and beyond. In every single space I currently occupied as a leader, artist, teacher, the question that keeps popping up in my mind is, where is our field currently? I'm talking about theater, arts, higher education, theater in higher education. We have evolving landscapes in our own institutions, departments closing or merging, compelled speech prohibition being put in place by local governments, shifts in funds allocation for arts in higher education. There are massive changes in which foundations are distributing funds in the professional arts. We have seen amazing leaders recruited to top companies in our field, yet not being given the resources and support to succeed. Companies pausing or closing. If we focus just on the mere pictures and in numbers, the moment certainly looks dire, but I wonder if we have asked ourselves, what have we done to contribute to the current landscape, and maybe what we haven't done. The bottom line is that old models and old structures are no longer viable and or sustainable. Yet, this is in fact a moment of massive opportunity to establish strong next steps, hopefully this time centering the values that we have professed to be missing: equity, justice, compassion, accountability, transparency. I look at this moment for ATHE in a similar way. While the numbers example is not quite the same, in essence, we are in a similar position. And then I question, why ATHE? For whom? How? I, CarlosAlexis Cruz, choose to say that ATHE must exist. Our organization, which is all of us in this room and beyond, through the net, should and must serve as a place in which we can advocate for education, training, and the inherent need of the arts in our society. We have navigated in our own research many of these obstacles and have exercised ways to overcome these. And I believe our field need us at this time. Our students need us at this time. Our community need us at this time. We have been talking about getting our house in order to better serve all of us, and now it's time to act on that. So for me, there are 4 main points that I would love to see movement behind in the years to come. That we actively aim to dismantle systemic racism and oppression as an organization and work towards extending such work and values across our departments and artistic practices across the nation. That theater departments and academic leaders see and support the value of our collective effort as advocates of theater and theater in higher education. The theater department look to better serve, be present, and represent their immediate communities. There are places in which these departments might be the only accessible art for the community, yet pedagogy stuck in all paradigms and models make the art inaccessible and, quite frankly, insulting to some of our communities. And on that note, I would love to see our conference to better serve, uplift, and connect with any of the local communities we might set foot in. I see this as my top priorities as president, while at the same time, we will look to strengthen the structure of ATHE as an organization true to its mission and aiming to solve this sustainability variable at this moment in time. Like my mentor, Rosa Luisa Marquez, one brilliantly stated, if we can't gather, we can't conspire. This is our space in our organization, so let's do so.
So as part of the conference survey that we did this year, we had a question on the conference survey that asked everyone for one word that they could describe this particular ATHE conference. We had over 600 people participate in this year's conference, and had around 200 people respond to the survey. So pretty typical, but a third of people engaged with the survey. That's fine. This was both people who participated in the virtual conference as well as the conference in Austin. And I wanted to share, I put together a word cloud based on the number of those single words that everyone responded to, and the kind of gut reaction to the conference. And so I'm going to share that now. And hopefully you guys can see my screen. But this was our word cloud. The way these things work is that when the word comes up multiple times, it makes the font bigger. So, pretty simple kind of algorithm for things. And I was really fascinated. I was like, what? This is really interesting that the word community was mentioned as many times as the word disappointing, that the word invigorating was mentioned as many times as the word expensive, that the word productive and fulfilling was almost the same as frustrated and underwhelming. So I did do a little research. While the survey was anonymous, we could tell whether you participated in person or in Austin, and some of the disappointing was the virtual was mostly from virtual participants, which I understand. We had very limited virtual sessions this year. But I did feel that visually, for me as a visual person, visual learner, that seeing these words in disparate connection to each other, that disappointing was the same as community, that rejuvenating was the same as underwhelming, that I still see enlightening and wonderful and friendly, and then I see uninspired and underemployed and adrift and messy. So I just thought I would share that with everyone today to kind of see how, for me, this really feels like a microcosm of where we are here at ATHE. Would it be too weird to say that it's a lot of microcosm of where we are, in America, in our institutions, this kind of bifurcation between extremes, between disappointing and invigorating? And I think this is where we are at this moment in ATHE, starting to go through some of the data from the different interactive feedback sessions that we had at ATHE. It was, I never want to be in a blue state again. Why can't you support the red states? I never want to be in a red state again. Why can't we be in the blue states? I never want to be in person again. I only want to be online. I only want to be in person. Online doesn't do anything for me as a conference. And as an administrator and as someone who's trying to completely respond to the needs of our membership, I was like, oh my God, where do I go from here? Because like some of you, I was not able to be in Austin this year either. It was a little weird, thanks to COVID. So I'm in the same spot that many of you who might be participating today who are not able to be there. Where do we go, and how do we respond to a membership and an organization that is only a membership organization because of the people who are involved, and be responsive and not be stuck. We're really at an interesting point. And I never would ever encourage my students or my kids to use that word interesting, but for me, we really are. It is all the nuances of that kind of vague word. And I think for the most part, as an organization, we're all incredibly opinionated on which way we want to go. And all of those opinions are, clashing with each other. So I'd love to turn things over to Charlotte McIvor. Charlotte's the treasurer of ATHE this year, and the two of us have been working over the last year to really look at the organization from a data point of view. Megan Geithner, our secretary, worked with the two of us on visualizing how our data works. And as boring as it might be, data really is a really great way to tell a story. We have numbers of how many people are members. We have numbers of how many people registered for the conference. And what do those numbers tell us? So we're going to kind of do a truncated version of what we talked about in Austin, just for time and energy on Zoom, but really start to see, how does ATHE look from the numbers?
To be here again today, have patience for the rerun, and I look forward then to the deeper conversation now, because what Amy says about that tangle of word cloud, the extremities of experience, of difficulty, of joy, of hope, but also pain. I mean, it just is so striking. So this year's conference was explicitly focused on what ATHE is and should be going forward, as Amy has shared with us today, as represented in the word count. We focused on action-based tasks, as well as organizing and consultation at the conference and as we reflect on it afterwards. My job as treasurer is to be testing the material and structural limits of the organization, working with the governing council and Amy Zygmonski, our executive director. So the most basic part of the job is making sure we meet our financial obligations with Amy and the governing council. But then the second part of it is looking for additional sources of income as we go forward, as well as thinking what we can do better with our money. So as CarlosAlexis has also gestured to, as is Amy, our governing council, the organization's board of director, has been focused over the last several years on how to guide the conversation through COVID. Like performing arts institutions across the US, I'll say again, these are closing as we speak due to loss of audiences, loss of donors, loss of community, etc. We've been acutely aware of the similar effect happening in academia, and as well as the challenges of fundraising in an environment where the fundraising for arts organizations that are producing performance for live audiences are having increasing difficulty. How do we describe what it is that we do, and how do we make legible the impact there from the level of the personal that I've described out larger into the field? We look at things together like the loss of tenure lines, the loss of funding for graduate students, the loss of cost of living, annual raises, the loss of conference funding, the creeping workloads. The new post-COVID territory that we are in seems to just keep raising more questions than it gives us answers to. So we keep thinking carefully into this, and we've been looking a lot through the lens of finances and how they connect to do our other transformational work together. I've been thinking a lot about a quote from Madeline Dorr in her book, I Didn't Do the Thing Today, which is actually about productivity guilt, but she says, time and attention is how we spend our love. And I think when it comes to the treasurer position, money is in a way how we spend our love and think about what we need to have in the bank to meet our transformable goals, to keep us sustainable as an organization, but also to keep us transformational. So you can see here from this snapshot who our members are. And the statistic that I just kept getting stuck on within the last year is the majority of our members, when they self-report on income, they are under $30,000 a year, suggesting that they are either graduate students and or precarious faculty working on short-term contracts or adjuncting. That is very striking. That is who a huge proportion of who we are is, and how do we serve that cohort better, as well as those in more mid-income ranges. To be clear, we still haven't figured out the answer here. We're a board made up of members just like you. We're flummoxed on how to deliver the conference, that gathering to conspire in person, and the community that our members want, and in a digital way, and be able to pay for all that might entail. This is again where we hope you can help us think into it today in terms of concrete action points to take forward together, or to talk to us about some of the impasses that we found. I'm going to give us a bit more of grounding financial data before turning it back to us as a collective. So to come back to that question of what of our members' finances and what does that tell us about the place of affordability, as I've showed you, 66% of our members have incomes of less than $70,000, and our largest cohort percentage-wise is the under €30,000 people. In terms of where we spend our money as an organization, the majority of it, in terms of 57%, goes to turning the lights on at the conference. And even so, we know that the kind of services that we're able to pay for with that proportion of the budget, things like, the issues around Wi-Fi within Austin this year, we're still not meeting the needs or asks of all our members in terms of the kind of friction-free nature of the event. In terms of who runs ATHE through their administrative labor and their paid labor, those are 16% of our organization spending. Can we go back one slide, Amy? The journals are 15%, the awards are 2%, and other is at 10%. Now going forward into paid versus volunteer labor, we have one part-time employee who is paid for their time. Amy's contract allows for 30 hours per week, and she also spends then the other part of her week with Aster. Next slide, please. We use some fractional contracts in terms of quarter-time employees. This brings us up to 80% of a person working full-time on ATHE as an organization. This includes an IT person. I know we had a lot of thoughts or concerns around the website this past summer. We also work with a marketing person in terms of those issues around communication with such a large membership in a way that has a better chance to reach people. Those contracts only allow for 10 hours of work per month. And then finally, we contract a conference specialist in the lead up to ATHE and to help on the ground at the ATHE conference. So to do more, we have to increase the amount of volunteer labor the organization already requires and or pull more from other areas of the budget to compensate, but there's very little room for reallocation. So just to spend a moment on this, so in all, we have 1.5 full-time staff members working with us over the course of the year. The communication to the membership, maintenance of the membership databases, the ATHE website, producing the ATHE conference, liaising with journals, it all goes into that bucket. It's a lot of labor without a lot of people time comparatively. Of course, there's volunteer labor on top of that, but I hope that might just put it a bit more in perspective. So let's go to the next slide, Amy, please. So the last 3 in-person conferences before Austin is what you see the statistics here. Our conference expenses have been higher in the last 3 conferences than the income we took in, like registration and exhibition fees. That is telling us a story about the changes within our field at large, the changes within conference funding availability, and also inflation. We don't have the full numbers from the most recent conference just finished, even though Amy may be able to give us a preliminary update, but the trend is very clear. Next slide, please. When we start to look at things to cut or to pull back on, which is, believe me, the first place I went when I began this job shiny and new, not really, I was beaten up then too last year. Okay, you can look at things like the AV expenses, they're so high, but AV is crucial for us to meet our requirements in terms of on-site accessibility. And as our working group reps have told us, as members of Fed back, there is still more that we could be doing there. So we can't take that out. Food and beverage, that is a part of the hotel contract that we are obligated to spend up to so much amount in order to not be in violation of the contract and incur additional fees. Also, food was one of the things that people were most uniformly enthusiastic with at Austin, and it does help keep costs down day by day for people, and you are getting value for money there. There's other costs in terms of, again, the conference staff, programming, which Amy, could you maybe speak a little bit to what goes into that bucket of programming here, because there's in fact quite a lot that fits there and in operations. In other words, the things we want more of and to do more of, they're a tiny slice of the budget, but where more could be cut down there. Let's go next to membership. So membership numbers have also been falling as a trend over time, which means reduced income, which means it's even harder to meet the basic yearly operating expenses, of which the conference is at the heart of it. We've been trying to think about what membership is or isn't doing for our community and look at tangible things like the ways in which members are finding it harder to even be reimbursed for membership from organizations. But if we lose and continue to lose the membership income, how are we going to replace that through other means? If we want to continue our core offerings, journals, the conference, professional administrative support for members of the organization. Next slide. So what we have been doing, and this is not meant in any way to be defensive, but we really just try to look at, okay, what are we doing? What could we be doing that is more, particularly with cost of living, knowing what our income levels are among members? We've actually not had significant jumps in costs of registration or membership over a sustained period, despite inflation. For example, the graduate student conference registration was $175 in 2011. This year, that same registration cost was $180. As Amy said, we offer a significant number of free registrations based on a number of grounds, and sometimes in exchange for labor, which I think added up to around 16% of registrations this past year. And those who pay the top level of membership and registration rates in practice heavily subsidize the conference and participation rates for students and those making under $30,000. So when I came into this organization, transformational justice, thinking in terms of racial and economic justice, was at the heart of what we were doing. So one of the things I wanted to look at is how are we doing that through who is covering the costs for the lower tiers of members. So we're doing some work there. Could we do more? Unsure. Next slide, please. So this question of what more could we do financially and do we have to do to meet those transformative goals of justice, of our ability to come together, to conspire together, while also keeping what we do affordable, sustainable, and having services on the ground if we are meeting in person. So there is fundraising, and I'm sure we'll have a discussion now about this as we move into the second section. There is the reallocation of money within budget, which, we've looked at, I've showed you the walls that we keep banging our heads into here. There is the question of alternative formats or times for gathering. And there was a lot of research done into looking at different cities, looking at different rhythms and times of the week over the summer, in which we found that the cost differentials were not, in fact, significant. There is the kind of option that we returned to quite a bit about whether we go to a university campus, whether we move to being a totally volunteer labor run organization, and so on. Amy, could I have the next slide, please? Something we talk about a lot is, can we have the conference on a college campus? But as college campuses have become more and more monetized as neoliberal environments where they're charging for tables, if we were to have had the conference in Austin at University of Texas, Austin, each table would have cost $250, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. So the price differential, as well as the guarantee of space within universities, has become increasingly precarious as, again, they're operating more and more like businesses in terms of the comparative campuses that we've looked at and members' own experiences. Could I have the next slide, please? We've also thought about the idea of regional conferences or hub and spoke models. A concern that we have is, again, because of the very low level of part-time of staff that we have who are paid labor, multiple regional conferences would require hiring more people, which takes more money, et cetera, i.e. multiple Amy's. As well, the concentration of our membership lives in the Northeast, and then there are much smaller percentages living elsewhere in the country. So we have equity concerns there in terms of whether that's actually going to solve the problem about giving more access to ATHE in an affordable way. Since the conference as well, we've also spoken to colleagues from AATE who tried to move to a university conference model a few years ago, and also found that the university campus model was more expensive in practice than what they actually had done originally in the hotel. Next slide, please. And we're getting here towards the end. So what we want to now open up the conversation with you about, again, for you here, you guys are devoted members. Many of you have come back for the rerun of myself and CarlosAlexis. What is the biggest priority with this information, looking it in the face? As an organization, what are things that we could do to make membership more meaningful, or do we need to move away from the idea of membership and have the conference experience as the center of what we do, how we gather, how we keep the organization financially sustainable? Thanks so much, and I will open it up to the floor.
There's a lot here, and I hope that we all take this moment as like we are trying to lead with transparency and clarity as much as we can, because we have acknowledged that has led to so much confusion, and confusion that will still exist for a while. I am of the mindset that as much as we can, we we want to bring these thoughts to the membership, because ultimately we're trying to be on this for changes, not just for ATHE and as our organization. I keep saying ATHE for the service that is done for the field and beyond. So we have to, you know, keep that level of openness. And I think it's, you know, you can expect that we will continue to do this and continue to like share the word, so we continue to get more and more membership in these calls when people are available. I mean, it's hard because we're all busy schedules and so on. But it is important to come to this space together as we're trying to make these decisions. We shouldn't be doing the things that or at least the perception that have seen being in the past of just decisions made in isolation. So I'm thankful for the time all of you in some of your mornings or afternoons, like it is for me here in the East Coast, or evening for you, Charlotte. So yeah, so we will have a board meeting next week, and then more will be shared from that, and we'll continue to share these thoughts that are here are going to be coming to the board meeting, and from the board meeting we'll be coming back and so on. So that's the way that I will hope to operate for the next 2 years. So thank you all.